This bike was becoming what could have been the fastest 48-volt Mototech on the internet, despite how it looks currently. But last time we tried anything, the Flipsky instantly blew up. But thanks to Flipsky, we have another one. Let's try this again. If you haven't seen previously what happened to this bike, why haven't you? You can check it out right here. At the time, Flipsky had provided me their brand new FT85GS controller to test, and I sure tested it by blowing it up instantly. But Flipsky didn't want to leave it there, and neither did I, so they sent me another one to definitely not blow up this time. And so we can finally see what we get out of this, within reason of course. At least this time I'm not going into it completely blind, so we can gloss over the unboxing, the wiring, and get straight to the setup and then actually installing it in the bike. Last time I was unable to connect via Bluetooth because I didn't have the latest version of their app which communicates with this, but now I have that version and can successfully communicate and talk to the controller, so now I can show you the setup process, but with a phone. Although before we handle that, I do still need to make one more connection, the most important connection to this, which is the battery to the controller. So let's see if this goes a little bit better than last time. Okay. We're off to a good start. So in the instructions that come with this controller, there's a QR code that you can scan, and that will be able to take you to their app, which you can then download. And once you download it, it looks like this. Pretty simple, but straightforward. So we're gonna turn on the bike now. So now that this has power, I can see that the voltmeter is showing proper voltage, and we got a blue light on the controller. Everything is powered and nothing's on fire. We're off to a good start. So then on the app, we're gonna tap this button in the corner, which is the devices. And then we're gonna look for a specific one right here, which is FTESC BLE, and it'll take you back to the home screen once it is connected. Now, same process that we did with the laptop, except just with a different interface. We're gonna first go to motor setup, and then this is going to have a couple of those parameters, same ones that I showed you previously, and we're going to enter in that information again. So the first section right here is motor parameter identification. This is the stuff that you need to do first before you actually do the test and the setup on this. First section here is the lithium batteries, and this is in series, not voltage. So this is a 72 volt battery, but that means there's 20 series batteries within that. So I'm going to hit the plus button a few times, up to 20. Motor rated current, I have gotten suggestions this time from Flipsky, even though they confirmed that all the parameters that I put in previously were perfectly fine and well within safe limits. So I'm going based on their 100% recommendations now in the initial setup as well as the further testing. And what they said to put in first initial is 100 amps. So I'm going to set this from 51 to 100. Cell cutoff voltage, by the way, is the number of batteries series. That's how much voltage is in each one of those batteries, and it defaults to 3.1. Do not touch that. It's perfectly fine. We're also going to make sure at the very bottom here is that CAN bus check mark. We're not using CAN bus for this, so we're going to uncheck that. So once we've entered in those things, we're going to hit parameter setup, and then it shows this section, which is the current max, and this again is the motor current, the motor brake current, battery current, and battery regen current. Similar to the motor rated current we put in initially, this is also going to be 100. And with motor brake current, they actually recommended that I should not be putting that at 0. It's actually safer to put it at a minus number. This one defaults to negative of the total current that's already in the system, so it's minus 50 right now, but they recommended negative 40, so that is exactly what I'm going to do. Now for battery current, and I previously had that at 100 amps, which is well within the 130 amps continuous that this battery is capable of. However, to be safe, and again, what the Flipsky engineers recommended is that I start with a lower number like 60, and then I can work my way up from there. Then finally, battery regen current, this defaults to negative of the full current, but again, they recommended that I set this to negative 20, which is what I'll do. And after all that, I'm gonna hit right at the bottom here, write success, that way everything is saved. Now that that's all saved, we're gonna go up to setup here and change to ESC parameters, just to make sure everything else is all good. The defaults here should be perfectly fine with my setup at the very least. So the startup mode is the default, which we want, which is the Hall sensors. Again, motor sensor port, Hall sensors. We don't have to change anything there. Only other thing really to change here if you want is the motor temp sensor type, which in this case, it does have a temperature sensor in this motor, and it is the NTC, but you can select here different options for that. And I believe this one is the NTC 10K at 25 degrees Celsius, so I'm going to stick with the default. Now that we got all that saved, we're going back to the next page, which is the motor parameter identification, the first things that we set up, and we're gonna go down to detection. Now this is where it's going to do its initial setup, and again, it is showing a list of warning items to make sure that this is properly set up and that everything is as it should be, and that it's up on a stand so it can be free spinning. In this case, I actually do have the wheel completely completely removed and the chain completely removed. I know there were several comments in prior videos saying that I should not be doing any kind of auto learn or initial setup with the wheel spinning, which I think is perfectly fine. I've done it on and off any different which way and it's been fine. But in this case, to appease everyone, no chain, no wheel. And having read through all of these and saying that it's going to be okay, I'm going to hit yes, and we're going to see it do its thing. Very loud noises. There it goes. Might be able to hear that, but the motor was turning. And there's the detection result right there on the phone. However, like last time, that's not everything. That's just the motor setup, but now we gotta tell it how to control the motor based on the controls. It doesn't know what's plugged in just yet, so we need to tell it. So we're gonna go back and we're going to go to control setup. Similar process here with similar drop downs that we saw as well on the laptop. So the first menu that you see here is called control setup, and you don't really have to do anything except for one thing, which is to scroll all the way down to the very bottom section, which says input signal type. Now this defaults to UART, which is actually Bluetooth controls, because Flipsky actually does a lot of personal watercraft and skateboards. So the controls for those are wireless, so you have a little handheld remote controller that controls the thing rather than a wired in throttle like we have. So to go from Bluetooth to the wired throttle, we're going to change this from UART to ADC. So now you can see on the top corner here that changed from UART parameter setup to ADC parameter setup. So we're going to hit that. And that takes us into the controls here to go further into what exactly this is wired into. And that's gonna be in the control mode here, so there's a lot of settings with this one, and this depends on what you have wired in. Remember, this is a pretty versatile unit which can communicate with a lot of different things. Not just a throttle, but you can also have a 3-speed, you can have a reverse gear, you can have a brake switch, or you can have all of those, or any combination of those. Which I do, by the way. I have a combination of not just the throttle, but also the 3-speed, so I need to tell it that with this control mode. And that control mode in this case is going to be current LMH gear for low, middle, high gear. Now that's all you really need to do here, but there is one other thing that I want to change right off the bat, which I found that I didn't quite like when I first rode this thing, which is the throttle response level. This defaults to a level 2, and the higher the level, the more responsive the throttle is. And for this purpose, for an electric dirt bike, I think it's great to have a really snappy throttle, although you can keep this if you want, but in my case, I want to have it at the higher level, level 4. So once you have that all saved and hit right and okay, then you go up again here to ADC parameter clib. Don't know what clib means, but this is the read mode. So what you do here is tell it what you have with the throttle by giving it just a wide open and a close, so that way it knows the voltages for the full range. And there's a start, setup, reset, and stop mode. So we're gonna hit start. It's going to be reading things, and you can see that with the values right here. So as I hit the throttle, it's going to go up to its found max, and then I go back down again, and then I'm going to hit setup, and then I hit stop. Finally, to save everything, right, okay, and I think we're done. So that's all that there is when it comes to the setup. It's pretty straightforward, but there's one more thing I want to show you. At the home screen here, there is another button that is test and display. So if we click into that, we get a dashboard with all sorts of things that we can see in real time as we're riding this or as we crack the throttle. So with this on, if I give this a few whacks, you can see all of the different things going on there. There's a lot to look at, which is really cool, but this is going to be very helpful for me in testing and tuning this so that I make sure, of course, that everything is well within the specifications and the limit of the controller. Well, now we can move on to the other part of this now that everything is initially set up, which I actually didn't show you last time, and that is the installation so that we can actually ride the thing. I did mention though that this is a pretty big unit. It's bigger than the ND72-300 from Far Driver, but it's actually not the biggest thing in the world. It's actually smaller than the 72-450, which I know for some reason, but I have it for the most part installed right here, at least the way it's going to be. It's upside down. There are some little prongs right here to connect to something, although this is expected to be put on some kind of flat surface that it could be drilled onto, but we're gonna make do and just kind of wiggle this thing in here so that it's perfectly up against the bars. And then I'm just going to, for now anyway, put some zip ties on these little sides here and just zip tie it to the bar on this side so it doesn't move anywhere. This is definitely not going to be the final install. This is just a temporary thing so I can actually start riding and testing this, but if anyone else has some good ideas for mounts, let me know. Here, now that we got everything in there, before I fully put this back together and everything covered, let me show you how I set things up. And also you can see that I added some color to the wheels. I think I want to go with this kind of color scheme on this bike going forward. But here is the unit, and here is how it's connected. 2 zip ties. Not exactly the most secure and not exactly the most revolutionary type mount, but again, this is temporary. So I have it positioned in such a way that on the right hand side here are the phase wires, and then down at the bottom are the battery leads, so they connect to the battery. They just do a little bit of a loop. And so I can be able to put the plastic cover back on. I loosened these and then angled them and retightened everything so that way it has a little bit of an angle to it, and that way they're not sticking out as much if I had them just straight across right here. Then we got the left hand side here. You can see where the phase wires go to the motor. Now these phase wires for the Soshin GTS motor are super long, so they do a little bit of a circle right here and then onto the controller. In the future, I might try to be brave and actually shorten those wires and reconnect the posts so that way there's no slack in this thing that I don't need. But for now, it's perfectly fine. There's actually a lot more room in here than I was expecting. Then at the very bottom here, you can just barely make out the connections to the throttle, to the hall sensors, and for the ignition. All of that's plugged in on the left side here and tucked straight up. So it goes right up here, and then I have all of the wires situated at the top here with all of the connections. All right, time to try this thing. Definitely recording. Added a beep, by the way, just because. So far, so good. Not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous still. Not giving it much throttle, but it's cruising. Still feels pretty mellow on the throttle response. Very gradual. All right, let's put some numbers to it. Just going easy. And that magic number right off the bat with low parameters, 35 miles an hour. So not a bad start. We can go faster though. We have the technology and hopefully the controller. So I guess next time we see this, it'll be fully functional and we'll see what it can do.
Now we're on the right track. The OG Moto Tech is back. You think the Flipsky will perform? No, what we saw is not the norm. Subscribe to follow along. That's really why I wrote this song. Just sub already.